Imagine 50,000 people screaming your name. And imagine that, in return, you swore to be burned, chained, beaten, and killed by the sword. That was the contract. That was the oath of a gladiator. And the man we're about to follow began his life without even the right to a name of his own. His name was Verus, a slave, not a citizen, not a free man, property, bought and sold like cattle. In ancient Rome, gladiators were, for the most part, slaves, prisoners of war, and condemned criminals. Verus was all three things nobody wanted to be, and yet he became exactly what everyone wanted to see. Before any fight, every gladiator swore a terrifying oath. Uri, Vinciri, Verberari, Feroce Necari. I will endure being burned, chained, beaten, and killed by the sword. It was the total surrender of the body to its owner. From that moment on, Verus stopped being a person. He became a weapon. Verus was around 20 years old when he was dragged to a city called Capua, south of Rome. It was there, and in schools like it, that men like him were transformed. Not into soldiers, into spectacle, into something built to bleed in front of a crowd. The school was called a ludus, and it was no ordinary prison. It was a factory for the living dead. Gladiators slept in tiny cells, trained all day with wooden swords, the rudis, and were watched like dangerous animals. Because that is exactly what Rome wanted them to be. Verus, on his first day, Verus was handed a weapon with no edge. The Romans were no fools. A desperate slave with a real blade was a riot waiting to happen. And they had good reason to fear it. A reason with a name that still made Rome tremble. 70 years earlier, a Thracian gladiator named Spartacus had escaped from a school in that very same Capua with some 70 companions, armed with kitchen knives and cooking skewers. Before long, his band became an army of tens of thousands of slaves. All-powerful Rome was very nearly humiliated by men it treated like beasts. Rome's revenge was a warning written in blood. When Spartacus's army was crushed, 6,000 prisoners were crucified along the Appian Way, the road connecting Rome to Capua. More than 100 miles of crosses, one every few paces. The message was clear: a slave must never forget what he was. Verus. So Verus learned the invisible rule of that world. He could be celebrated, idolized, showered with gold by the crowd, but he was still property, a hero in chains. And it was with that contradiction nailed to his chest that he picked up the wooden sword and began training to survive. The training was brutal and scientific at the same time. The Romans even had doctors who specialized in gladiators. The most famous in history, Galen, began his career stitching these men back together. A gladiator was expensive. Letting one die for nothing was throwing money away. Ancient medicine advanced, in part, by patching up slaves so they could bleed again. Verus, but perhaps the most surprising detail of Verus's life was on his plate. Because what these feared warriors ate was not lion meat or bull's blood. It was, for the most part, poor man's food, and there was a scientific reason behind it. Hold on to this one. What made a gladiator was less the sword and more the belly, and their bones still tell that story today. Verus, gladiators were nicknamed hordearii, the barley men. The name was almost an insult. Barley was cheap feed, food you gave to animals. Day after day, Verus ate barley porridge, beans, and grains. Almost no meat. The muscle came from the work, the fat from the diet. And it was no oversight, it was strategy. Analysis of gladiator bones found in a cemetery in Ephesus proved it. The diet was almost vegetarian, extremely rich in carbohydrates. The fat formed a layer that protected nerves and blood vessels. A cut to the skin bled heavily and thrilled the crowd, but rarely reached anything fatal. The belly was armor. They also drank a tonic that would seem insane today, water mixed with the ashes of burned plants. The Ephesus bones showed extremely high levels of calcium and strontium. It was, essentially, an ancient supplement, pure calcium, to strengthen bones battered day after day. 15 centuries before modern chemistry, they were already doping the skeleton. Verus. When Verus finally entered the arena, he discovered that it was not one man against another. It was one character against another. Each gladiator was a type, with his own weapons, armor, and style, designed to create a balanced, thrilling duel like a fighting video game. There was the Murmillo, with his crested helmet shaped like a fish, a large shield, and a short sword. There was the Thracian, light and agile, with a curved, deadly blade called a sicca, made to strike an opponent's back over the top of the shield. Each fight was a clash of styles, almost a bet. Who wins, strength or speed? And there was the strangest of them all, the Gladiators. No helmet, almost no armor. He fought with a net and a fisherman's trident. He looked the weakest, but he was the most treacherous. His tactic was to trap the enemy in the net and stab him from a distance, dancing out of reach of the sword. Verus, the Gladiators, almost always faced the secutor, the pursuer, a man armored in a smooth, rounded helmet, made on purpose so the net would slide off and never catch. It was the fight of the fisherman against the human fish, and it was one of the crowd's favorites. Before each fight, the weapons were inspected, sharpened, approved. Everything had its ritual. The gladiators paraded, saluted the man staging the games, and only then did steel meet steel. The sound of a packed arena was deafening, 50,000 throats reacting to every blow. Verus, and here the greatest myth of all falls apart. You grew up believing that every gladiator fight ended in death. It didn't. Gladiators were far too expensive. Years of training, food, doctors, lodging. Killing one every single fight would have been like burning money inside the arena. The real numbers are startling. It's estimated that, in the 1st century after Christ, the chance of a professional gladiator dying in any given fight was roughly 1 in 10. In other words, the vast majority of the time, he walked away alive. The fight ended when one of them raised a finger, asking for mercy. To win was not to kill, it was to dominate. Verus, that is how Verus began to win. Not by killing everyone, but by surviving everyone. Each victory added fame, and fame, for a gladiator, was the most dangerous and the sweetest thing there was, because one day it could buy the only thing he truly wanted. To understand what Verus faced, you have to see the stage. And no stage in history was ever as monstrous as the Flavian Amphitheater, the building the world would come to know as the Colosseum. Opened in the year 80 after Christ, it swallowed between 50 and 80,000 people, an entire city screaming around a single man. It was a machine of engineering, not just a stadium. 80 entrance arches let tens of thousands of people enter and leave in a matter of minutes, a flow that modern stadiums still envy. Every spectator had an assigned seat according to social class. All of Rome fit inside, organized by blood and money. High above hung a forgotten marvel, the Valerio, a giant canvas awning, worked by sailors from the imperial fleet, brought in especially for the task. They pulled ropes as if trimming the sails of a ship, casting shade and an artificial breeze over the crowd. The Colosseum had, quite literally, a retractable roof in the 1st century. Verus, beneath the sand where Verus stood lay another world. The Hypogeum, 2 levels of tunnels, cells, and cages, filled with elevators driven by pulleys. Animals and gladiators rose up through the floor, appearing in the middle of the arena as if by magic. The crowd never saw the sweat and fear down below. It saw only the apparition. The word arena comes from harina, sand, and it was no decoration. The sand was spread across the floor for a reason both practical and sinister, to soak up the blood. Between one fight and the next, slaves turned the sand over to hide what had happened there. The stage cleaned itself, ready for the next act. A day of games followed a fixed script. In the morning, the hunts, exotic beasts brought from the ends of the empire, lions, leopards, bears, even elephants and giraffes. At midday, the executions of the condemned. And in the afternoon, the main course, the one everyone waited for, the gladiators. The hunts, the venations, were a slaughter of animals on an industrial scale. At the games that opened the Colosseum, ancient sources speak of thousands of beasts killed in just a few days. The empire scoured Africa and Asia for ever rarer creatures. Some were even driven to extinction across entire regions to feed the arena's hunger. And there was the most unbelievable spectacle of all, the naumachia. Ancient sources tell that the Colosseum was even flooded to stage naval battles, with real boats and combatants fighting in the water. The Romans turned the ground of death into an artificial sea. Few buildings in history were ever so ambitious. Verus, all of this had a name in Latin, panem et circenses, bread and circuses. The games were free for the people. Emperors paid fortunes to entertain the masses by popularity and display power. Verus didn't know it, but every drop of his sweat was also a political move, on a board he would never see. Verus, at the center of it all, stood the man staging the games, the editor, often the emperor himself. He was the one who gave the final word over the life of a fallen gladiator. And here lies the second great myth, that gesture the movies burned into your mind and got completely wrong. You've seen it 1,000 times. The emperor stretches out his arm and turns his thumb down, condemning the gladiator to death. It's one of the most famous images in history, and it is, almost certainly, a modern invention. The thumbs down was not born in Rome. It was born in a painting. The image comes from an 1872 canvas, Pollice Verso, by the French painter Jean-Léon Gérôme. It was so powerful that it became the truth in everyone's mind, Hollywood included. But it was art, not documentation. The Romans did use gestures with the thumb. It's just that no one is certain which one meant what. The theory most accepted by historians is almost the opposite of what we think. Hiding the thumb inside a closed fist may have been the sign of mercy, the sword put away, and the thumb extended, pointing, mimicking a blade driving home, would have been the sign of death. If that's true, generation after generation got the gesture exactly backwards. Verus, and there was another force deciding Verus's fate, the crowd itself. If the audience had taken to the gladiator, it screamed for clemency, not out of pity, but out of self-interest. They wanted to see him fight again. A beloved gladiator was worth more alive. Verus's fame was, quite literally, his shield. Verus, the fallen fighter, could beg for mercy by raising a finger, the ad digitum. The organizer looked to the crowd, read the mood, and decided. Missus, spared, or the final sentence. Most of the time, with a brave fighter, the answer was life. Death was the dramatic exception, not the rule. But when death did come, it had its own dark ritual. A man dressed as Charon, the ferryman of the dead, touched the body with a mallet. Another, dressed as Mercury, checked with a red-hot iron whether the gladiator was truly dead and not faking. Even the ending was theater, performance to the very last breath. Verus learned to read the crowd the way one reads the weather. He knew when to attack to tear loose a roar, when to retreat to build suspense, when to spare a fallen opponent to win the public over. He was no longer just a fighter. He had become an artist of his own survival. And fame brought things unthinkable for a slave. Gladiators covered the walls of Rome like idols. Elite women sighed over them. In Pompeii, ancient graffiti was found calling certain gladiators the Sigh of the girls and Lord of the maidens. The lowest man in society became the object of desire of the highest. Verus, there was even a belief that a gladiator's sweat and blood held powers. The sweat scraped from their skin was sold as an aphrodisiac and a remedy. The blood of a dead gladiator was thought to be a cure for epilepsy. Verus's body, alive or dead, was worth money either way. He never stopped being merchandise. Verus, but in the middle of all that madness, one single object shone brighter than gold, brighter than fame, brighter than the desire of the elite. A simple piece of wood. And it was for that object that Verus, secretly, fought every night in his mind. That object was the rudis, a wooden sword, the very same bladeless tool they trained with. Except that, handed over in public by the man staging the games, it changed meaning entirely. To receive the rudis meant only one thing, the impossible thing, freedom. Verus, a gladiator who fought with exceptional bravery, who won the crowd over victory after victory, could be freed from the arena. The rudis was an honorable retirement. The slave became a free man. For Verus, that rough piece of wood was the most sacred object in the world, the key to his own cage. History recorded legendary gladiators who lived exactly this dream, and one who refused it. The Syrian Flamma fought 34 times, won 21, drew 9, lost only 4. He was granted the rudis, freedom, not once, but 4 times. And 4 times he refused. He chose the arena. He died at 30, still a gladiator, by his own choice. Think about the weight of that. A man held freedom in his hand 4 times and gave it back, because the arena had become the only life that made sense to him. The roar of the crowd was louder than the call of freedom. Some gladiators were slaves to their master. Flamma was a slave to his own glory. Verus, and here is the fact almost no one imagines. Not every gladiator was forced. By the end of the Republic, it's estimated that about half of them were volunteers, the octorati, free men who sold themselves to the arena. They traded their freedom for the chance at fame, money, and the thrill of combat. They chose that hell. There were even emperors obsessed with the arena. Commodus, at the height of his power, went down himself to fight as a gladiator against opponents who stood no chance, and charged the public treasury a fortune for each performance. The most powerful man in the world pretended to be the lowest, because even the throne envied the shine of the sand. Verus, but Verus had no throne and no choice. He had only his body, his sword, and the crowd. And victory after victory, barley after barley, he crept closer to the impossible. Each fight won was one step toward that wooden sword worth an entire life. Verus, and then, in a single day, the name of Verus truly entered history, because there really did exist a gladiator named Verus, and his fight was so extraordinary that a Roman poet turned it into a poem, the first detailed account of a gladiator combat that has survived to this day. In the year 80, at the opening of the Colosseum, the poet Martial described a duel between 2 gladiators, Verus and Priscus. The two fought so long, with such force and balance, that neither could defeat the other. The crowd went wild, and the audience began to demand, at the top of its lungs, something never seen before. Verus, they demanded that both be spared, both, together, as equals. Verus and Priscus lowered their weapons at the same moment, exhausted, each recognizing in the other a worthy opponent. And the Emperor Titus, before 50,000 people, made a decision that would be immortalized. Verus, Titus declared both of them winners. Both received the palm of victory, and both, according to the poem, received the rudis, the wooden sword, freedom. There was no loser. There was no death. 2 slaves entered the arena, and 2 free men walked out, beneath the roar of the greatest crowd in the world. Verus, it was the absolute opposite of the thumbs-down myth. The greatest recorded fight in gladiator history did not end in blood. It ended in a double freedom. And that is why, 2,000 years later, we still remember the name Verus, not for the death he dealt, but for the life he won. Verus, for Verus, that wood in his hand was worth more than all the fame, all the gold, all the desire of the elite women. It meant he had stopped being property, that he was, at last, the owner of his own body. The slave who swore to be burned and killed by the sword walked out of the arena on his own 2 feet, free. But the age of the gladiators would not last forever. For centuries, these games were the heart of Roman entertainment. They arose, in fact, from funeral rites, combats offered in honor of the dead centuries before Christ. What began as religious ceremony became an industry of spectacle. The rise of Christianity changed everything. To the new faith, sacrificing human beings for amusement was an abomination. Christian emperors began to restrict the games. Gladiator fights slowly faded away over the course of the 5th century as the old Roman world crumbled. Verus, the animal hunts survived a little longer than the men, but they too came to an end. The Colosseum, the stage of so much blood, was gradually abandoned. Earthquakes cracked it open. Romans looted its stones to build churches and palaces. The Temple of Spectacle became a quarry. Even so, it refused to die. Today, nearly 2,000 years later, the Colosseum still stands in the center of Rome, one of the most recognized structures on the planet, visited by millions every year. The building made for death became one of the greatest symbols of civilization there is. Verus and the barley men, they left clues that science has only now deciphered. The bones from the Ephesus cemetery, studied with modern technology, told everything. The diet, the ashes, the blows, the wounds healed, and the wounds fatal. Verus and his brothers of the arena spoke to us across 2,000 years of silence. Those bones revealed even how many of them died, some with precise, standardized blows to the skull, the sign of a ritual mercy blow, given to the one who lost and was condemned. Death in the arena, when it came, had rules. It was brutal, but it was not chaotic. It was a system. Verus, and there is the most uncomfortable truth of all, about us, not about them. 50,000 people gathered to watch men fight for their lives, and most of the time they rooted for clemency, not for death. The Roman public was cruel and sentimental at the same time, exactly like the public of today. Because what was the arena, deep down? It was sport, it was soap opera, it was politics, it was religion, all in one place. The gladiators were the athletes, the stars, the idols. They had fans, nicknames, merchandise bearing their names. Rome invented celebrity culture 2,000 years before television. Verus, and maybe that is why their story still grips us. Because Verus was not just a slave with a sword. He was an ordinary man, thrown into an impossible system, who found a way to survive, to shine, and, against all the odds, to win. The most improbable story told in the sand. Think again of the oath. I will endure being burned, chained, beaten, and killed by the sword. That was the starting point. That was where Verus began. And the fact that so many, even so, managed to become idols, earn fortunes, and even win their freedom is what makes this story as human as it is bloody. Verus, the myth sold us monsters thirsting for death and thumbs turned down. Reality gave us something more complex and more fascinating. Men of flesh and barley, cold rules, doctors, contracts, fame, and a crowd that, deep down, wanted to see its favorite live one more day. Gladiators were, at once, the victims and the stars of Rome. Slaves without rights and idols without equal. Animal feed on the plate and elite adoration in the bed. Men who swore to die and spent their entire lives learning, with a desperate genius, how to stay alive. Verus, and when the dust of the sand settled, the same question always hung in the air of the Colosseum. Life or death? Most of the time, it was life. Not out of kindness, out of strategy, out of money, out of love for the crowd. But it was life. And for a man who was property, one more day alive was already a kind of victory. Today, when you walk through the Colosseum, you tread over the tunnels where Verus waited, in the dark, for the elevator that would launch him before 50,000 people. The sand that drank his blood is no longer there. But the story remains, carved into the stone, into the bones, and into a poem 2,000 years old. Verus, if this story gripped you, do one thing for me. Comment below on what shocked you most: the oath of death, the barley diet, the myth of the thumbs down, or the two gladiators who walked out free on the very same day. And if you like history told the way it deserves to be told, big, real, and impossible to forget, subscribe to World and Stories. Because the world is full of stories like this one, buried in the sand, waiting to be dug up. Verus, the slave who swore to be killed by the sword, walked out of the arena with a wooden sword in his hand, free. And the roar of that crowd, somehow, still echoes in the stones of the Colosseum. Until the next story.